Imagine a country smaller than Manhattan that once boasted citizens twice as wealthy as Americans. Picture an island where police chiefs purchased Lamborghinis they couldn't drive, where unemployment was a lifestyle choice rather than a crisis, and where nearly every resident lived in extraordinary affluence. This wasn't a fantasy or a utopian experiment. This was Nauru, a tiny speck in the South Pacific that achieved something remarkable, becoming the world's richest nation per capita in the 1980s. Yet the story doesn't end with wealth and prosperity. Within just 2 decades, this same island nation experienced one of history's most dramatic economic collapses, plummeting from unimaginable riches to devastating poverty. How does a country fall from such heights? The story of Nauru stands as one of history's most dramatic economic lessons, offering profound insights about resource management, sustainable development, and the dangers of short-term thinking. Before we dive deeper into this extraordinary tale, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for the world documentaries, because understanding our world's most fascinating stories matters now more than ever. Pleasant Island's hidden fortune. When British explorers first glimpsed Nauru in 1789, they encountered a tropical paradise draped in lush vegetation and pristine beaches. The island's breathtaking beauty inspired them to christen it Pleasant Island, a name that would prove tragically ironic given what was to come. For decades, this 8-square-mile territory seemed to offer little beyond coconut palms and indigenous wildlife, supporting a small population that lived in harmony with their environment. Everything changed when a British geologist made an astonishing discovery at the turn of the 20th century. Beneath Nauru's green canopy lay one of Earth's richest deposits of phosphate rock. This was unglamorous like oil or gold. It was essentially centuries of accumulated seabird droppings mixed with marine organisms, transformed over millennia into a mineral goldmine. What made this discovery revolutionary was phosphate's critical role in agriculture as fertilizer, essential for feeding the world's rapidly expanding population. Suddenly, this remote Pacific island controlled a resource that global powers desperately needed, and Pleasant Island's fate was sealed forever. Colonial exploitation and devastation. Germany, which controlled Nauru as a colony, wasted no time exploiting this newfound treasure. Mining operations transformed the island's landscape with brutal efficiency, extracting approximately 80 million metric tons of phosphate over the following decades. Processing facilities, shipping ports, and industrial infrastructure sprouted across land barely larger than Central Park, forever altering the island's ecological balance and traditional way of life. When World War I erupted, Australia seized control of Nauru and continued the extraction at an even more aggressive pace. The phosphate was sold at heavily subsidized rates, what Australians called mates rates, primarily benefiting farmers in Australia, New Zealand, and Britain, while Nauruans received minimal compensation. The island's original inhabitants watched helplessly as their homeland was systematically dismantled. The topsoil stripped away, leaving behind what National Geographic later described as a ghastly tract of land. World War II brought additional horrors when Japan invaded, establishing forced labor camps and committing atrocities that reduced Nauru's population to just 600 survivors by 1945. Independence and temporary glory. When Nauru finally achieved independence in 1968, the new nation inherited both a valuable resource and a devastating legacy. 1/3 of their island had been reduced to an uninhabitable wasteland, yet phosphate mining remained their only viable economic activity. The small population lacked diverse skills, and their isolated location made developing alternative industries nearly impossible. Despite these limitations, independent Nauru determined to claim their rightful share of the phosphate wealth that previous colonizers had monopolized. The results were initially spectacular beyond imagination. By 1981, Nauru's per capita GDP reached $27,000, equivalent to $88,000, today making them statistically the world's wealthiest nation per capita. Average Nauruans enjoyed twice the income of average Americans, a staggering achievement for a country with barely 11,000 residents. The government provided free education and healthcare, phosphate royalties flowed to landowners, and many citizens chose voluntary unemployment, living comfortably off their nation's mineral wealth. Sports cars became status symbols despite the island's circumference being drivable in just 1 hour, and extravagant spending became commonplace in this suddenly affluent micronation. The hidden crisis. Beneath Nauru's glittering surface, disturbing problems were accumulating with frightening speed. The concentration on phosphate extraction meant agriculture had withered to almost nothing, forcing complete dependence on imported food and even water. With newfound wealth, Nauruans abandoned traditional diets of fresh coconuts and fish, embracing imported processed foods, instant noodles, canned goods, and sugary sodas. By 1980, medical experts declared Nauru faced an obesity epidemic, and by 2002, the World Health Organization ranked it worst among 170 nations for average body mass index. The health crisis revealed itself in shocking ways, including that police chief unable to fit behind his Lamborghini's steering wheel, life expectancy dropped to barely above 60 years, and diabetes became epidemic. Anthropologist Amy McLennan from Oxford University noted she was lucky to find one vegetable a week during her stay. Ironically, Nauruans were well educated about nutrition risks, with extensive school programs promoting healthy eating. The problem wasn't ignorance, but access. Decades of mining had destroyed agricultural capacity so thoroughly that fresh, healthy food simply wasn't available. This health crisis continues today, though with somewhat improved life expectancy now reaching the low 60s. The legacy of dietary change remains deeply embedded in Nauruan society. Failed diversification attempts. Nauru's leaders understood their phosphate would not last forever, estimates suggested. Depletion within 2 generations, then desperately sought economic diversification. One strategy involved establishing offshore banking, and by the early 1990s, roughly 400 foreign banks held Nauruan licenses. This initially generated millions in fees through a scheme offering economic citizenship, allowing anyone to obtain Nauruan passports without visiting the island, creating a haven for money laundering and tax evasion. International pressure eventually forced Nauru to abandon this dubious enterprise in 2005, with the United States categorizing them as a rogue state under the 2001 Patriot Act. Another approach involved creating a sovereign wealth fund, following Norway's successful model of investing resource revenues to generate long-term returns. Unfortunately, Nauru's fund suffered catastrophic losses through risky investments and outright fraud. Even launching a national airline in the 1970s couldn't save them. Perhaps most infamous was their investment in Leonardo the Musical, a portrait of love, depicting a fictional love triangle involving Da Vinci and Mona Lisa. The production became one of London theater's biggest disasters, losing money Nauru desperately needed during its economic freefall. Survival through controversial means. By 2001, the phosphate reserves were exhausted. Foreign investments had failed spectacularly, and even the central bank had gone bankrupt. The nation that had been the world's wealthiest per capita just 20 years earlier now faced complete economic collapse. In this moment of desperation, Australia proposed a controversial solution, the Pacific Solution: offshore detention centers for asylum seekers and refugees intercepted at sea. Australia would pay handsomely for this arrangement. Despite fierce opposition from many Nauruans who found the policy morally objectionable, their government accepted, and the regional processing center has operated intermittently since 2001, with renewed transfers beginning in 2023. As of early 2025, over 100 asylum seekers are detained on Nauru, the highest number in over a decade. This arrangement, combined with foreign aid primarily from Australia, has kept Nauru's economy functioning, with the detention center representing a major revenue source. The United Nations Human Rights Committee ruled in January 2025 that Australia retains responsibility for the arbitrary detention of people transferred to Nauru, adding international controversy to an already ethically fraught arrangement. Lessons from Paradise Lost and recovery efforts. James Njamia, a minister born in 1911, witnessed Nauru's entire tragic arc. He told the New York Times, "I wish we'd never discovered that phosphate. I wish Nauru could look like it was before, when I was a boy. It was so beautiful, trees, green everywhere, fresh coconuts and breadfruit. Now I see what's happened here and I want to cry." His lament captures the profound tragedy of a nation that traded its paradise for temporary wealth, seemingly losing both forever. Yet Nauru's story isn't entirely one of despair. Today, with a population of approximately 12,000 people, the nation has achieved a GDP per capita of around $13,000 as of 2022, roughly aligning with global averages. The economy has shown moderate recovery, with unemployment rates dropping to approximately 5% by 2021. A dramatic improvement from the 90% recorded during the worst crisis years. With a GDP of approximately $200 million and significant development assistance averaging $41 million annually, Nauru demonstrates resilience even amid ongoing challenges. The story illustrates what economists call the resource curse: how natural resource wealth mismanaged can devastate nations. While Nauru remains heavily dependent on controversial detention arrangements and foreign aid, the nation has stabilized from its lowest point, offering cautious hope for future development. Join the World Documentaries community by subscribing and hitting that notification bell. We explore the most compelling stories shaping our world. What lessons do you think Nauru's tragedy holds for resource-rich nations today? Could better planning have prevented this catastrophe, or was it inevitable given colonial exploitation? Has Nauru's recent stabilization shown a path forward, or does dependence on controversial detention centers simply represent another form of exploitation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and love hearing your perspectives. From environmental disasters to economic miracles, we cover the stories that help us understand how our world works. Don't miss our next documentary exploring another fascinating chapter of human history. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, the most valuable lessons often come from understanding what went wrong.